The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It came in sheets, thick and punishing, as though the sky itself was angry. And yet, Marissa stood there, outside the grand gate of the Whitmore estate, drenched to her skin, her fingers frozen around the iron bars, her sandals worn flat, with holes in the soles squelched with every step she had taken to get there. Her coat was not a coat at all, but a man's old blazer, 2 sizes too large and reeking faintly of the bus station floor, where she had spent the last 3 nights. She reached for the rusted intercom button and pressed it with trembling fingers. Silence. Then. Yes, a voice bored, male, impatient. I came for the job, she stammered, struggling to sound dignified despite the mud clinging to the hem of her dress. The maid position, a crackle of static, then laughter, sharp, mocking. Lady, you sure you're at the right address? This ain't the soup kitchen. Her face flushed red with shame, but she didn't move. She was used to that tone. She had heard it her entire life from landlords, from employers, from strangers on the street. The way people looked at her and immediately decided she didn't belong. Please, she said, I'm not asking for charity, just a job. I'll do anything. There was a pause. Then the sound of a mechanical lock buzzing open. The side gate clicked, and a tall man in a black raincoat stepped out, holding a clipboard. He looked her up and down with open contempt. You're Marissa Bell. She nodded. You look like you just crawled out of a sewer. He wasn't wrong. Her hair was matted from the rain. Her dress a faded green thing she had patched more times than she could count clung to her legs. Her hands were red from cold and calloused from years of scrubbing floors that didn't belong to her. But still, she stood tall. I walked for miles to be here. I need this job. The man sneered. Well, don't get your hopes up. The Whitmores don't exactly hire charity cases, but the old lady said she'd see you. Don't ask me why. He turned and walked, not checking if she followed. Marissa hurried behind him, trying not to let her wet shoes squeak too loudly against the marble floor. Once they stepped inside, the Whitmore estate was nothing like she'd ever seen. Crystal chandeliers, velvet furniture, walls covered in paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. Every step she took felt like she was walking on clouds made of money. Waiting in the hallway were 3 young women, dressed in designer clothes, lounging on a curved couch like cats in the sun. They turned to look at her. One of them raised an eyebrow. Oh, so that's her? Another laughed. She looks like someone's maid already, just not ours. The third girl smirked, then snapped a photo with her phone, pretending it was casual. Smile. I need a before picture. Marissa's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that dignity was silent. Just then, a creaking sound broke the tension. The grand oak door at the end of the hallway opened. Out stepped an old woman, small but upright, dressed in a robe of deep violet silk. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore. Her presence filled the room like perfumed subtle, but impossible to ignore. She looked at Marissa for a long moment, not at her dress, or her shoes, or her soaked hair, but into her eyes. You walked here in the rain. Marissa nodded. Yes, ma'am. No umbrella. I lost it. Eleanor said nothing for a while. Then she turned to the man beside her. "Put her in the east storage room. We'll try her for a week." The man blinked. "The storage room?" Eleanor gave him a look that ended the conversation. "If she complains, she's free to leave." Marissa bowed her head. "I won't complain." The east storage room was exactly what it sounded like. A converted closet with a single mattress on the floor, no window, and a dangling light bulb that flickered when it rained. The first night she couldn't sleep. She lay on the mattress, listening to the wind rattle the glass above. Her stomach growled, but she didn't dare ask for food. She clutched her bag to her chest, the one with 2 shirts, a bar of soap, and a broken picture frame with a photo of her mother, now long gone. She whispered, "Just 1 week, just one chance." The next morning, she woke before dawn. She scrubbed floors, polished banisters, ironed linens until her arms ached. The other staff barely spoke to her, except when ordering her around. One of the granddaughters, the one with the phone, watched her mop the entry hall, sipping orange juice. "You know, what's funny?" she said. "You work harder than anyone here, but you're still just trash with a mop." Marissa kept mopping. "Don't you ever want more?" The girl pressed, like, to be someone, not just a shadow. Marissa looked up, her voice soft but steady. "Being invisible doesn't mean I'm not someone." The girl rolled her eyes. "Wow, deep. Maybe you should write a book about it. Memoirs of a wet rat." She poured the rest of her juice onto the clean floor and walked away, heels clicking. Marissa stared at the spreading puddle for a moment, then bent down and mopped again. Days passed. The rain stopped, but the storm didn't. The Whitmore family was chaos. The grandchildren fought constantly. One was secretly selling antiques from the house online. Another snuck strangers in at night. The third spent hours rehearsing fake tears in front of mirrors, preparing for whatever the old hag left in her will. But none of them visited Eleanor. Marissa did. Every night, she brought Eleanor tea. She sat by the old woman's bedside and read books aloud, classic stories, the kind no one told anymore. Eleanor never asked her to, but she never stopped her either. One night, Eleanor spoke. "Why do you stay, Marissa?" She paused mid-sentence. "Because I said I would. Even when they treat you like dirt. Especially then." Eleanor chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "You're either the kindest fool I've met, or the most dangerous woman alive." Marissa smiled. "Maybe both." On the 7th morning, Marissa rose before the sun. As always, her hands ached. The joints in her fingers were swollen, a reminder of the week-long polishing of wood panels. The constant ironing, the endless dust that clung to the ceilings. But she didn't complain. She had never complained. She stretched quietly in her tiny storage room and touched the edge of the light bulb, still flickering. One day, it would go out completely, but that day hadn't come yet. She liked to believe the same about herself. Downstairs, the house was quiet, still dark. Marissa tiptoed across the grand foyer and opened the heavy front door to collect the morning paper. She wiped her muddy slippers on the mat and returned to the kitchen to begin breakfast toast. Scrambled eggs, berries arranged into neat little flowers, just as Eleanor liked. But today, there was a note on the fridge, scrawled in thick red marker, "Kitchen closed to vermin until further notice." Marissa stood still, the fridge door open, cold air seeping into her thin sleeves. She recognized the handwriting. Clarissa Eleanor's youngest granddaughter. The one with too many credit cards and not enough self-awareness. Marissa folded the note and placed it in the trash without a word. She boiled water on the stove. She cracked the eggs anyway. She knew Eleanor would wake soon and expect breakfast. The woman hadn't said it, but Marissa knew. She depended on her. Perhaps not for food, but for consistency, for quiet companionship, for being the only soul in the house. Who did not take something from her? By 8 a.m., the others began to drift. Clarissa was first, still in silk pajamas, dragging her feet across the marble like a lazy cat. "Didn't you read the note?" she said without looking up. "No kitchen access for rats today." Marissa plated the eggs and toast calmly. "I only cook for your grandmother." "Oh, so now you're her private chef too? What's next?" "You'll start giving her financial advice." Clarissa grabbed a banana from the bowl and tossed the peel on the floor near Marissa's feet. "Oops." Marissa picked it up. Silently, the second granddaughter entered Alyssa, the one who wore white even while eating spaghetti. She wrinkled her nose as she saw Marissa holding a dish towel. "God, are you always cleaning? Do you even sleep?" "Not much," Marissa answered softly. "Figures. Poor people don't have time to dream." The words didn't land with the same cruelty as they were meant to. Marissa had heard worse. But behind her calm eyes, something simmered, a slow, silent burn. Not rage, not resentment. Resolve. Later that day, Eleanor called her into the study, a grand room with red carpets, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a grandfather clock that ticked so slowly it sounded like the heartbeat of the house. Eleanor sat at her writing desk, wearing a shawl despite the summer heat. Her hands trembled slightly. "They treat you terribly," she said without preamble. Marissa looked down. "They're just unsure of me." "No," Eleanor said. "They're spoiled and cruel. And they think they own this house because they were born into it." She looked out the window for a long moment. "But they forget. I built this place. Not them. Not their parents. Me." Marissa waited. Eleanor's eyes were sharp when they turned back. "Tell me something. If you had this house, what would you do with it?" The question caught her off guard. I'd probably open it to others. People like me. Make sure someone always had a bed and a light bulb that worked. Eleanor smiled faintly. "You're dangerously noble, Marissa." That night, the whispers began. She heard them from the hallway as she scrubbed wine stains from a rug. "She's trying to manipulate Grandma. Bet she's angling for a payout. Ugh. Imagine if that witch actually left her something." Over my dead body. Marissa kept her eyes on the rug. Her hands worked faster. She had never asked for anything. Not even a raise. Not even a proper bed. And certainly not a share of a house she didn't own. But the house knew her. Every floorboard she polished, every broken drawer she fixed, every stormy night she stayed up, checking for leaks, or power outages. The house knew her rhythm, and Eleanor did too. A week later, Eleanor fell ill. Not suddenly, but steadily. She moved slower, ate less, spoke only to Marissa. The granddaughters began visiting her room more often, each pretending to care more than the last. Marissa watched as they brought flowers, perfume, store-bought soups with labels still attached. But none of them stayed to talk. None of them read to her when the rain started. None of them tucked the blanket under her feet or checked if the window had a draft. Only Marissa. One night, Eleanor spoke barely above a whisper. If they knew what I was planning. Marissa paused mid-sentence in her book. I don't want to know, she said gently. It's not my place. Eleanor looked at her, eyes rimmed red. That's why I trust you. A week later, a box arrived in the mail. It was a plain brown package with no return address. Inside was a dress, simple, soft, pale blue cotton, brand new. There was no note, but Marissa knew who had sent it. She wore it the next morning, and the house stared. Clarissa dropped her phone. Alyssa coughed into her mimosa. What is that? Marissa, for once, didn't answer. She just walked quietly to the study, with her head held high. That night, someone slashed the dress. She found it folded on her mattress, a neat diagonal cut from shoulder to hem. The fabric hung like the halves of a wounded heart. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just gathered the pieces into a small cloth bag and went downstairs. She sat in the corner of the empty kitchen and stitched, by hand. The tear closed. Every pull of the thread was a promise to herself. You don't have to become cruel to survive cruelty. By the time Eleanor's condition worsened, the granddaughters were in full panic mode. They called lawyers. They whispered about wills. One of them snuck into the old woman's bedroom and tried to flip through her desk drawers. Marissa saw it all. She said nothing, but she made sure Eleanor had her favorite soup that night. And warm socks, and someone to hold her hand when the thunder cracked outside. They started locking the drawers. Every cabinet in Eleanor's room now had new golden locks on them. For her safety, the lawyer said, she might start confusing things. But Marissa knew the truth. They weren't locking things away to protect Eleanor. They were hiding the future from themselves. Every night, the old woman grew quieter, paler, and every morning, her 3 granddaughters grew louder, demanding, planning, practicing their grief before the mirror like it was a performance they hadn't quite perfected. One morning, Marissa found Eleanor's photo frame face down on the nightstand. The glass was cracked. Inside was a picture of a young Eleanor, strong, proud, holding a hammer beside the construction of the original estate. Marissa picked it up carefully and fixed the frame using glue she bought with her own money. She didn't ask who had broken it. She already knew. Clarissa began a new game that week. Every time Marissa entered a room, she'd pretend to gag. Ugh. Someone forgot to clean the servant again. She would spray perfume into the air after Marissa passed, holding her nose like a spoiled child. Alyssa wasn't much better. She would move Marissa's cleaning supplies, hide them behind curtains, under cushions, and then complain to the house manager that nothing was getting done. And Beatrice, the eldest, she played the most dangerous role of all. the silent watcher. She would observe, never speak, but always take notes on a tiny notepad. Just in case, she once whispered when Marissa caught her watching her fold Eleanor's bedsheets. You never know who might be trying to manipulate an old woman. Marissa didn't respond. She had long learned that speaking the truth to those who had already decided you were a liar was like screaming into a storm. Still, she stayed. She stayed when Eleanor's hands grew too shaky to hold a spoon. She stayed when the others left on weekends, attending spa retreats and cocktail brunches. She stayed when the estate grew cold not because of the weather, but because no one in it seemed to love anyone anymore except Marissa and perhaps Eleanor. One night, Eleanor asked for her mother's quilt. The blue one, she said, voice brittle. The one with the gold stitching. Marissa knew which one she meant. It had been folded in a cedar chest at the foot of Eleanor's bed for decades. She'd seen it once covered in dust, untouched by time. But when Marissa opened the chest, the quilt was gone. In its place was a note. Old junk. Donated. Marissa's hands clenched the edge of the trunk. She walked down the hallway and into the living room, where Clarissa was laughing at something on her phone. Did you throw away the quilt in Grandma's chest? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Clarissa didn't look up. What quilt? The blue one, with gold stitching. It was her mother's. Clarissa smiled. Oh, that thing. Yeah, it smelled like mothballs. Donated it last week. You're welcome. You didn't ask her. Didn't need to. She won't even remember it tomorrow. She barely remembers what day it is. She asked for it tonight. Clarissa's smile faded. Why do you care so much? You're just the help. This isn't your family. This isn't your legacy. You're a ghost in this house. That night, Marissa didn't sleep. She sat on the cold floor of the kitchen, staring at the window as the lights of passing cars cast strange shadows across the walls. A ghost. She whispered the word. She wasn't angry. She wasn't broken. But something inside her shifted. Maybe she was a ghost. But if she was, she'd haunt this house with kindness until it remembered her. The next morning, she brought Eleanor breakfast porridge with honey and a single purple flower from the back garden. Eleanor looked at her with tired eyes. You remind me of someone, she said. Who, me? Before the money. When I was still building this place with my own two hands. She took a bite, then another. They think I'm weak now, that I don't see what they're doing. Marissa hesitated. And do you? Eleanor smiled. I see everything. That's the blessing of age. You learn to watch in silence. Later that day, Beatrice tried to enter Eleanor's study. The door was locked. She screamed at the lawyer over the phone. Demanded access. She's writing new things. We need to see them. Marissa walked past, carrying a basket of folded linens. Beatrice turned to her, eyes sharp. You think you've won something, don't you? I don't want to win, Marissa said. Liar. That evening, Eleanor handed Marissa the sealed envelope. It's for the lawyer, she said. Tomorrow. Marissa looked at the envelope. Heavy, thick. The seal pressed with gold. Should I open it? No. Just deliver it. May I ask what it is? No. Then, softer, but thank you for never asking before. That night, Eleanor slept peacefully, and Marissa sat beside her, holding her hand long after she drifted into dreams. Outside, the sky rumbled. A storm was coming again. And this time, it wasn't just rain. It was truth. The envelope burned in her hand. Marissa had delivered hundreds of letters in her life, reminders, bills, even eviction notices, but this one was different. This one trembled, even though it didn't move. It was thick, sealed with gold wax, and her name was written in Eleanor's elegant, curling script, to be delivered to Mr. Granger, my lawyer. Those were her instructions, and Marissa followed them. She walked to the study just after sunrise. The house was still quiet, everyone asleep, or pretending to be. She knocked on the door softly, and Mr. Granger opened it with a cup of black coffee in one hand and a fountain pen in the other. "Ah, Miss Bell, she asked me to give this to you." He raised an eyebrow. Then his face changed. Carefully, he took the envelope, turned it in his hand once, then twice. He didn't open it immediately. "Did she say anything else?" "No, just that I deliver it." He nodded. "Good. That means she still trusts you." He sat at the massive oak desk, opened a drawer, and locked the envelope inside without reading it. "That's it, for now." Marissa wanted to ask more. She wanted to ask what was inside. A new version of the will, a letter, a confession. But she didn't, because Eleanor had said, "Don't ask. By lunchtime." The energy in the house had shifted. Clarissa was on the phone longer than usual, pacing, snapping at the cook. Beatrice spoke in hushed tones with Mr. Granger outside on the terrace. Alyssa searched the hallways like she'd lost something or someone. Something had been disturbed, and the house felt it. Marissa continued her routine, but the silence followed her now. Everywhere she went, eyes trailed behind. The maids whispered when she passed. She gave the old woman something to sign. They say it's a will. She's got the old lady wrapped around her finger. That evening, Eleanor didn't eat much. She pushed her food around the plate, occasionally looking up at Marissa, like she wanted to say something but never did. Marissa tucked her in as usual, dimmed the lights, and sat in the corner of the room with a book. "You've become very quiet," Eleanor finally said. "Everyone else has become very loud." Eleanor chuckled. "They think you're stealing from me." "I know. Are you?" Marissa closed the book. "No." "Good." Then silence. Again. The kind that says more than words ever could. The next morning, Marissa woke to shouting. Clarissa's voice echoed down the marble halls. "This is a setup. That old witch is losing her mind." Footsteps, slamming doors. "That woman, that maid, is manipulating her. Can't anyone else see it?" Marissa didn't run. She walked calmly down the hallway toward the sound, passing portraits of ancestors who had once built empires, now reduced to silent witnesses of their descendants, fighting over imagined fortune. When she reached the parlor, the entire family was gathered. Granger stood by the fireplace, holding a clipboard and a leather portfolio. Clarissa turned the moment she saw Marissa. "Oh, look! Here she is, the puppet master. Tell me, Marissa, how long have you been writing Grandma's thoughts for her? Marissa didn't blink. I only bring her tea. Alyssa snorted. And bring yourself into her will, too. Mr. Granger raised a hand. Enough. There's no official change in the will. Not yet. Yet. Clarissa pounced. So there is a change coming. He didn't answer. This is ridiculous, Beatrice said. She's just a maid. You can't let her walk out of here with our family's legacy. I've never asked for anything, Marissa said softly. Clarissa stormed forward. You don't have to ask. You just sit there, smiling, letting her give it to you. I listened to her, Marissa said. Voice still calm. You shout. That night, Eleanor didn't ask for dinner. She asked for music. Marissa brought in a small Bluetooth speaker she had bought at a second-hand shop 2 years ago. She played old classical piano pieces Debussy, Chopin, Satie. Eleanor's fingers moved faintly under the blanket, as if dancing to forgotten memories. Do you believe in legacy? She asked suddenly. I'm not sure, Marissa replied. I believe in people. But what about what we leave behind? Marissa thought for a moment. I think it's less about what we leave and more about who remembers we were kind. Eleanor closed her eyes. Then I hope they remember you. By morning, another envelope appeared. This one was left on Mr. Granger's desk unsigned, but clearly addressed to him. Inside were documents typed, clean, full of legal language. A revised version of Eleanor's estate. In it, the Whitmore estate was to be held in trust until further decisions could be made based on care and merit, not bloodline, and Marissa Bell's name was included, not as owner, but as custodian. Clarissa almost broke a vase when she heard, custodian of the house. This is our home. Mr. Granger didn't flinch. It's still Eleanor's until she dies, and she has every right to assign stewardship as she sees fit. She's not thinking clearly. She's thinking more clearly than all of you combined. Beatrice left that evening. She claimed she had business abroad. Alyssa packed half her things just in case. Clarissa stayed, but her laughter vanished every time she passed Marissa in the hall. She spat, "You'll never be one of us." And Marissa thought, "I never wanted to be." That night, a strange peace settled over the estate. The wind howled outside, but inside there was music, tea, and a quiet old woman smiling faintly at the only person still reading to her without wanting anything in return. Marissa turned the page, letting her voice drift through the candlelit room. And when the storm finally passed, she read, "There stood the house, still whole because someone had loved it." It started with a cough. Nothing alarming, a light, dry cough Eleanor blamed on the season. But 3 days later, her voice cracked in the middle of a sentence. And the day after that, she couldn't speak at all. Marissa found her sitting up in bed, mouth moving, but no sound came out, just a weak puff of breath. Her eyes were sharp, confused, and trembling not from illness, but from frustration. "Don't panic," Marissa whispered, running for water. "Don't panic. I'm here." But inside, she was panicking. She had seen this before, with her own mother. The slow theft of voice, the cruel way time stripped away power, leaving only presents. Mr. Granger came immediately. He called for a specialist, who ordered tests, x-rays, silence, temporary laryngeal paralysis. He said, could recover. Could not. Clarissa didn't ask if Eleanor was okay. She asked, can she still sign documents? Marissa wanted to scream. Instead, she stood outside the room, listening as the doctor said, for now, yes, but we should limit her stress. Stress. Oh, please. Clarissa snapped. She's the one causing it. She's 86. The doctor replied quietly, be gentle. We'll try, Alyssa said, already on her phone. We'll try not to kill her, Clarissa muttered. That night, Marissa sat beside Eleanor's bed as the woman scribbled in a small notebook. Her handwriting was shaking, but legible. They're circling like vultures. Marissa held her hand gently. You're safe. Another line. Not when I'm gone. The silence in the house thickened. Without Eleanor's voice, the halls grew quieter, but not calmer. Meetings behind closed doors. Calls to new lawyers. Arguments about real estate taxes and asset freezes. And all the while, Eleanor watched, unable to speak, unable to command. Only Marissa stayed beside her every hour she could, reading, listening, answering questions written in trembling lines of ink. And then came the fire. It started in the garden shed. Dry tools, old chemicals, a spark. The flames didn't reach the house thanks to the gardener's quick action, but the fire department found something off. The locks had been cut from the outside. Clarissa's perfume bottle was found half melted near the edge of the flames. Marissa didn't accuse, but she saw Clarissa that night, pacing her room, eyes wide, fingers trembling like she'd seen a ghost. You think you're untouchable, she hissed at Marissa in the hallway. But when she dies, you'll be just another homeless rat with a dream. Marissa didn't respond. She just walked on. But inside, something snapped. 2 days later, Eleanor tried to write another letter, but her hands wouldn't move. They spasmed. The pen dropped. She wept. Sound less. And Marissa wept too, silently, kneeling beside her. It's okay, she whispered. I understand. You don't have to say anything. But Eleanor tried, over and over, lips forming shapes that never became sound. Until finally, with all her strength, she mouthed two words. Don't leave. That night, the house shook with rain. Thunder rolled across the sky like war drums. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the dark, Marissa stood at the window, watching the storm crash against the glass. She wasn't afraid of the weather. She was afraid of what the house would become when the storm passed. The next morning, she found the study door wide open. Inside, the safe had been forced. Papers were scattered across the floor. The new version of Eleanor's will gone. In its place. A crumpled note with one word written in lipstick across it. Liar. She called Mr. Granger immediately. He arrived with 2 assistants, reviewed the damage, then quietly asked Marissa, were you the last one in here last night? No, she said. I was with her. She was afraid. Then you may be the only one I can trust. They reviewed surveillance. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Beatrice entering the study at 2:07 a.m. holding something in her hand. Leaving. 14 minutes later, Clarissa and Alyssa were nowhere near, but someone else was seen lurking. The housekeeper, Carla, paid off, threatened. Nobody knew. But damage had been done, and Eleanor no longer had the strength to restore it. That night, Marissa sat at the edge of Eleanor's bed, telling her what had happened. The old woman's eyes closed, not in sleep, but in something deeper. Surrendered. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. Marissa left her with music again, a soft piano sonata that once played at Eleanor's wedding. Then she cleaned the study, gathered the torn papers, saved what she could. She stitched together the words Eleanor had left behind. In the quiet, she whispered, "I won't let them erase you." But deep inside, she wondered, can one quiet voice preserve a legacy when the world screams against it? It was quiet again, not the peaceful quiet of early mornings with birdsong, but the uneasy kind, the silence that comes after shouting, when everyone holds their breath, waiting for the next wave to crash. The study door remained closed. Eleanor hadn't left her bed in 3 days. She ate little, wrote nothing. Marissa changed her sheets, wiped her hands, massaged her shoulders, but the old woman only nodded faintly, as if to say, "I know you're here, and that's enough." Granger returned with a new document. It wasn't the will. It was a legal memorandum, something he called a temporary stewardship authorization. If she can't speak, he explained, then we rely on what she already signed, what she already expressed, and what she clearly intended. Clarissa laughed when she heard it. She intended to give our family home to a glorified janitor. She intended, Mr. Granger said coolly, to place it in the hands of the only person who never asked for it. Alyssa tried to object. Beatrice, who had since returned from abroad, refused to comment. But inside, all three knew. The damage was done. Legally, the house now answered to Marissa Bell. Not forever, not permanently, but long enough to terrify them. The whispers changed overnight. The maids stopped giggling behind her back. They stood straighter when she walked by. The cook offered her tea. Even the gardener, who had never spoken a full sentence to her before, muttered, "You saved the roses last month. That was good of you." Marissa said nothing, but she felt it. The shift. It wasn't about power. It was about presence. They finally saw her. She moved into the east wing, not the main suite. Not Eleanor's chamber, but a small guest room with a real window and a working lamp. Her mattress was no longer on the floor. Her clothes no longer lived in a plastic bag. She hung her mother's photo on the wall beside the mirror and whispered, "Still not mine." But closer. Clarissa did not take it well. She burst into the east wing on the third night and threw a stack of towels on the floor. Just because you have a piece of paper doesn't mean you belong here. I know, Marissa said calmly, folding the towels. You think this makes you something? No. Good. Because you're not. You don't even have a last name. Marissa paused, then smiled softly. You're wrong. I just don't say it because nobody ever asked. Clarissa stood there, fuming. Not because she had lost yet, but because she couldn't figure out how a woman with no title, no inheritance, no designer clothes, had become the most powerful person in the house. But Marissa didn't feel powerful. She felt tired and worried because Eleanor's eyes had started to dim, not physically, but spiritually. She didn't look at the books anymore. She didn't listen to the music. She just watched the ceiling, like waiting for something or someone. One afternoon, Eleanor took Marissa's hand and tapped it once, twice, then mouthed, "Window." Marissa opened the curtain. Sunlight spilled across the bed like a blessing. Eleanor smiled, weakly, then reached beneath the pillow and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside was a key. Old, worn, gold-plated. Eleanor placed it in Marissa's palm, curled her fingers around it, and nodded once. Marissa looked at it. "What's it for?" Eleanor mouthed. "Basement." Then, with great effort, left wall, panel. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marissa went downstairs. She passed the parlor, the grand piano, the empty dining room. She unlocked the basement door and descended the stairs. The air smelled like time, dust, earth, something like forgotten memories. On the left wall, she found it, a false panel, almost invisible. Behind a rack of wine. Inside were letters, dozens of them. All in Eleanor's handwriting, all dated across the last decade. To lawyers, to banks, to charities, to foundations. But more than that, to Marissa. Unsent. She opened the first one. "Dear Marissa, I never told you how I felt about the way you looked at this house, not as a building, but as something alive. You reminded me of myself when I had nothing but a dream and a hammer." She opened another. "I know they think you want something, but I know you. You only ever gave. You never once took." And another. "They call you the maid, but to me, you are the one who made this house a home again." Marissa sank to the floor, letters falling around her like feathers. She didn't cry, not yet, because she hadn't read them all. Hours passed. The sun began to rise when she finally stood. She carried one letter in her hand and opened the last one, the most recent. She took it upstairs. Eleanor was awake, barely. Marissa sat beside her, placed the envelope on the blanket. "You wrote this for me. Can I read it to you?" Eleanor blinked once. "Yes." Marissa opened it and read. "Dear Marissa, if this is being read aloud, it means I am near my end. I hope I died with your hand nearby. I hope your voice was the last thing I heard. I want the world to know you were my choice, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. You became my family not because of blood, but because of your heart. This house is not built on money. It is built on care, and in that way, it already belongs to you." Marissa looked up. Eleanor's eyes glistened, and then closed. Still breathing, still here, but quieter than ever. The next day, the locks were changed. Marissa held the new master key. Clarissa screamed. Elisa packed. Beatrice said, "This isn't over." And Marissa thought, maybe not, but it's begun. The house felt different that morning. Not louder, Not quieter. Just still. As if it, too, was holding its breath. Marissa woke earlier than usual. She hadn't meant to. But something inside her stirred her from sleep. A pulse, a presence. The kind of knowing that doesn't come from sound or thought but from love. She slipped on her sweater, walked barefoot down the hall, and opened Eleanor's door. The room was warm, soft, lit by the golden blush of early morning, and Eleanor was awake. Eyes open, but unmoving. Marissa stepped closer. The old woman's eyes turned slowly to meet hers. "You're still here," Marissa whispered. Blink. Yes. Do you know what day it is? No response. It's Thursday. Your favorite. The chef is making raspberry jam. You once said Thursdays taste like raspberries, and rebellion. Eleanor's eyes smiled, though her mouth didn't. Marissa sat down beside her, pulled the blanket gently higher across her chest. "You don't have to say anything," she said. "I've read all your letters. I know." Another blink. Longer, heavier. "Do you want music?" This time, Eleanor blinked twice. Yes. Marissa turned on the little speaker again. Debussy, Claire de Lune, the same piece she had played the night Eleanor gave her the key. As the music floated through the room, Marissa picked up the hairbrush from the nightstand and gently combed Eleanor's silver hair. Each stroke was slow, reverent, like brushing the mane of a wild animal that had finally laid down to rest. "They hate me, you know," she said with a faint smile. "Your granddaughters." No answer, but Eleanor's fingers twitched slightly. "They think I stole you, stole this house, stole your legacy." She paused. "But you know the truth, don't you?" A small nod. Barely there. Marissa leaned in, eyes glassy. "Then that's enough." At noon, Mr. Granger arrived. He entered the room quietly, placed a folder on the desk, and nodded at Marissa. "Her mind is still sound," he whispered, "but she may not last the night. I know. Do you want me to stay?" "No, not yet." He nodded once more and left, shoes silent on the carpet. In the afternoon, Clarissa barged in. She didn't knock, didn't speak to Eleanor, just stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. "So this is it." Marissa looked at her. "She's tired. She's delusional. She's dying." Clarissa didn't flinch. "Then I guess the real question is what happens when she does?" "She'll be remembered," Marissa said. "And you won't like how?" Clarissa scoffed. "You think this house will stay yours? It was never mine." "Then give it up." "I will, when she asks." But Eleanor didn't speak again that day. She drifted in and out of sleep. Marissa read to her from one of her favorite books, Wuthering Heights, the parts about stormy moors and aching hearts. And when the light began to fade from the window, she lit a candle. "You told me once," Marissa whispered, "that a candle burns brightest just before it dies. But you're wrong." She leaned closer. "You're not fading. You're passing the flame." At dusk, Eleanor opened her eyes one final time. They met Marissa's, held. Spoke. And then, without a sound, they closed. Marissa didn't move for several minutes. She sat still, the candle flickering beside her, the music still playing softly. Then she stood, closed the book, turned off the speaker, and kissed the old woman's hand. "You can rest now." The news spread quickly. By morning, the house was a circus. Lawyers, distant relatives, reporters. A nurse who arrived too late. Marissa stood in the hallway, surrounded by movement but untouched. Mr. Granger approached quietly. She signed. "The final document 3 days ago," he said. "The real one, the real one." He handed her a copy. Marissa didn't open it. She didn't need to. Clarissa tried to contest it within the hour. Eliza backed her up. Beatrice said nothing, but paid for a private investigator. And yet, none of it mattered, because the will had been witnessed, notarized, filed, and sealed. Eleanor Whitmore had made her choice. She left the house to NoOne. She donated it to the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation for Women Without Homes, and named Marissa Bell as its first director. The granddaughters were speechless, then furious, then gone. By nightfall, their rooms were empty. And Marissa stood alone in the grand foyer, echoing with possibility. She walked to Eleanor's room one last time, closed the curtains, straightened the pillow, extinguished the candle. Then whispered, "It's yours still, but I'll protect it now." As she stepped into the hallway, the house creaked, not from age, but from relief. As if the very walls had exhaled. It had been 3 weeks. The Whitmore estate was no longer a battlefield. It had become something else, quieter, lighter. The curtains were pulled open every morning. The floors, once walked with tension, now echoed with calm steps. There were no more perfume clouds, no more slammed doors, no more whispered threats in the hallway. Marissa had moved her things to a modest guest room on the 2nd floor. She refused the master suite. "It wasn't mine," she told the lawyer. "It never will be. I'm just here to keep it warm." Every day, a few women came by. Not reporters, not heirs, but women who had once stood where Marissa had stood, outside gates, in the rain, with their dignity soaked and their hope cracking. The foundation had begun its work. The East Wing was now being refurbished to host temporary shelter. Rooms. The garden was replanted, not with roses, but with herbs and vegetables. Marissa oversaw it all. Quietly. Firmly. With grace. Until one afternoon a man arrived. Not in a suit, not with a lawyer, but in boots covered in dirt, a jacket with one missing button, and eyes too familiar to ignore. Marissa saw him from the top of the staircase. And froze. He stepped through the front door as if he'd been there before. Which, in a way, he had. Not this house, but her life, her pain. Her story. "Hello, Marissa." His voice hadn't changed. Deep, slow, like a memory you don't want, but can't throw away. Marissa didn't answer at first. She just stared. Her fingers tightened around the banister. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. "I heard what happened, that you were running a place for people like me. This isn't for people like you," she said quietly. He looked around. "You've done well. I survived. Same thing, isn't it?" "No," she said. "It's not." His name was Caleb. He had once been everything to her. The reason she worked 16-hour days. The reason she lost her apartment, trying to cover his debts. The reason she had slept on bus benches for 3 nights straight after he disappeared with their rent money, and left a note. "I'm not good for you. You deserve better." She remembered the way that note folded in her palm, how small it made her feel. Now, he was here, and he was hungry, and tired, and lost. She gave him a meal, not out of softness, but because she refused to become what the world had been to her, cruel when people were broken. He ate slowly, never met her eyes. When he finished, he stood up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I don't want anything." She raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here?" "Because I remembered something," he said. "Something you said once under a bridge, when we thought we were gonna freeze." "What?" "You said, if I ever get to a place where I can help someone, I will, because I'll never forget how it feels to be invisible." He paused. "I'm not asking for help, Marissa. I'm asking for forgiveness." She didn't speak, didn't move, just watched him, this ghost who had held her heart and crushed it in the same breath, standing in her doorway like a question without an answer. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at Eleanor's old desk, rereading the letters, looking for something, anything, a reason to say yes, or no. But there was no line about him. No line about what to do when the past knocks on the door you worked so hard to build. The next morning, Caleb was still on the porch, wrapped in a donated blanket, eyes closed. Not dead, just waiting. She stood above him, coffee in hand. "You can stay," she said, "but not here." He opened his eyes. "I didn't think you'd. There's a work site down the road. They need hands. I made a call. You'll sleep there, eat there. You'll be paid. No one gets special treatment here." "I didn't come for special." "Good." She turned, stopped, and Caleb, "Yeah, you'll never owe me anything. But don't you dare make me regret this." He nodded, did in single quotes T's smile. Didn't cry, just picked up his bag and walked with her, no promises. No apologies, just steps. One after the other. Later that day, she sat under the old oak tree with a new resident, a teenage girl with bruised wrists and silent eyes. The girl asked, "Do you believe people can change?" Marissa looked out toward the road, where a man with worn boots was lifting cinder blocks like he meant it. "No," she said softly, then smiled. "But I believe they can choose again." The house was quiet again, but not like before. This time, the quiet wasn't heavy, it was whole. The kind of silence that feels like a full breath after crying. The kind that made Marissa pause in the hallway one morning, close her eyes, and realize, for the first time in her life, she wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. The foundation had taken root. 6 women now slept in the East Wing. Each one had a different story, but they all had the same look in their eyes at first. Hollow, afraid, uncertain. Marissa knew that look too well. She met it with warm soup, clean beds, and no questions. The rules were simple. You're not broken, you're becoming. Caleb worked quietly. He never asked for more, never knocked on her door. But she saw him every day, arriving early, hauling bricks, helping build the extension behind the greenhouse. Once he caught her watching. He nodded. She nodded back. And that was enough. One afternoon, Mr. Granger returned. He carried a small velvet box in his hands and a brown leather folder under his arm. "There's one more thing," he said. Marissa raised an eyebrow. "I thought everything had been settled." "Almost everything," he said, smiling gently. He placed the box on the table and opened the folder. Inside was a final letter. From Eleanor. "Dear Marissa, if this reaches you, it means you stayed. I had no doubt you would. But even so, I needed to leave one last piece behind. Not for the house, not for the others, but for you. There is a drawer in my wardrobe, behind the silk scarves. It holds the only thing I never gave away, because I didn't know who deserved it. Now I do." Marissa stood in Eleanor's room later that day, hands trembling as she opened the wardrobe. The scent of lavender and old cedar rushed out. She moved aside the scarves, soft, expensive, each wrapped in tissue. At the very back, she found a small wooden box. Inside, a locket. Gold, old, engraved with the initials EB. When she opened it, there was a photo on one side. Eleanor, young, smiling beside a girl with dark curls and dimples. On the other side, nothing, just a mirror. But behind the mirror, tucked inside a tiny flap, was another note. "The photo is of me and my mother. The mirror is for you, because now, when I think of home, I see your face." Marissa sat down on the edge of the bed. For the first time in weeks, she cried, not out of sorrow, not out of anger, but from something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. That evening, the women in the East Wing surprised her. They had set the dining table, baked bread, cooked soup, cut wildflowers and put them in a chipped teacup in the center. They didn't say it was for her. They just pulled out a chair. "You always feed us," one girl said softly. "Let us feed you tonight." Marissa sat. Tasted the bread. It was burnt at the edges, the soup a bit salty, but it was the most beautiful meal she had ever eaten. Later, as the others cleared plates, Caleb approached. He had something in his hand. Not a gift, not an apology. Just a small square of paper. He handed it to her. She unfolded. It was her note. The one she had once written to him, long ago, under the bridge. "If I ever get to a place where I can help someone, I will, because I'll never forget how it feels to be invisible." "I kept it," he said. "It kept me." She folded it again. "It's yours," she said. "I have something else now." He looked puzzled. "What's that?" She smiled. "A name." Outside, the wind stirred through the garden. The house glowed. The porch light stayed on late into the night on purpose, because someone, somewhere, might still be walking in the dark. And this time, there would be a door that opened. Spring arrived slowly, but when it came fully. The trees on the Whitmore estate bloomed again, this time with purpose. Marissa had asked the gardener to replace the roses with orange blossoms and jasmine. "Roses are for show," she had said, "but jasmine feeds the bees." Now, the bees were back. So were the birds. So was life. The foundation had a name now: the Hearth Project. A place not just for shelter, but for rebuilding warmth, identity, and voice. It filled quickly. 6 women became 10. 10 became 15. Some stayed only weeks. Some stayed months. Some left in the middle of the night with nothing more than a note. You reminded me I matter. I'm not afraid anymore. Marissa kept everyone, folded carefully in a small wooden box once used to hold Eleanor's sewing needles. One morning, she walked out to the front steps and found a backpack on the bench. No name. No note. But inside were children's shoes. 3 pairs. Later that day, a knock. A woman stood there, face thin, eyes cautious. Behind her, a boy and a girl, clutching the baby tight. I heard, "You don't turn people away." Marissa knelt down and said gently, "Not anymore." The house changed again. Walls once used for portraits now held crayon drawings. The dining table now had mismatched chairs and plastic cups. There was laughter, real laughter. One night, a little girl ran down the hallway screaming, "Miss Marissa, there's a fairy in my closet." It was a moth, but Marissa got a glass, gently caught it, and whispered, "She's a tired fairy. Let's let her fly home." And the girl believed her. So Marissa believed, too. Caleb still worked behind the greenhouse. Still quiet. Still trying. One day, he came to her holding a paintbrush. "I'd like to repaint the east wall." "Why?" "Because it's still grey." She smiled, then painted. "What color?" She paused. Then said, "Something that doesn't match, but feels right." On the anniversary of Eleanor's passing, Marissa planted a tree, a small dogwood, right under the window of Eleanor's old room. She dug the hole herself. No ceremony, no speeches, just a whisper. "You didn't leave. You grew roots." She placed one of Eleanor's scarves beneath the soil. Let the roots find her. By summer, there were 22 residents and a waiting list. People wrote letters to the foundation. Some came from other states. We heard about the woman who turned a mansion into a home. We heard about the house with no locks. Marissa never advertised that part, but it was true. There were no locks on the resident rooms. Each woman was given her own space, her own key, but no one was locked in or locked out. Because for Marissa, freedom meant trust, and she trusted them. All until they gave her a reason not to. No one ever did. One afternoon, a girl from the shelter asked, "How did you get this place?" Marissa thought for a while. "Someone believed in me." "Were they rich?" "Yes, but not in money." "Then in what?" Marissa smiled. "Time. They gave me their time." Years passed. Not quickly, but meaningfully. The house grew. So did the foundation. So did Marissa. Her hair grayed, her back curved, but her eyes never lost that steady, quiet warmth. One day, a new volunteer arrived. Young, energetic, eager. She knocked on Marissa's office door with wide eyes. "Hi, I'm Emma. I just joined the team. They said I should meet you." Marissa stood slowly, extended her hand. "Welcome home." In her office, above the desk, hung the locket Eleanor had given her. On one side, the old photo of Eleanor and her mother. On the other side, a photo of Marissa and a little girl drawing on the sidewalk. And between them, etched into the frame, this house is not built on stone. It's built on kindness. That night, the porch light stayed on Dot as it always had. And maybe somewhere in the dark, a girl with no name and nowhere left to go was still walking. But this time, when she reached the gate, there would be no guard, no locked door, only a light, and a woman waiting by the window, whispering, "You're not lost. You're early."